You don't have to move it. I just don't want to mess you up in there. Good evening, everybody. 6 minutes. I'll try to keep it as best I can to something less than that. I've been in situations where we were asked to speak for 2 minutes, and I've had as much as 15. So you kind of do what you can to maybe kind of cut in the middle. I do want to share some thoughts with you, and be welcome to address your questions. It's unfortunate that my opponent isn't able to be here. As you might have seen in the press a bit over the last day or two, there's been some question about this idea of residency and who is resident and where they might live. And I was hoping to put some of those issues to bed tonight if he were able to be here, wherever that bed may be, pun intended. But again, what I feel like, I want to go ahead and talk about the things that are important, I believe, in this race. And I think it's important for the voters. And I want to focus my attention to that over the next few minutes. Tell you a little bit about myself. Fortunately, this is seeking my third term in the Virginia Senate. I've served 2 times previous to this. My first run for office and was successful was 20 years ago this year. I was a tad younger, just a 32-year-old, and out hustling and getting the job done. In that period of time, actually going back 29 years, I've lived all of my 29 years that I've lived in Virginia, barring the fact that I was born in Charlottesville, but my 29 years living in Roanoke County, moved there in Roanoke County in 1982, and lived in the same house for the last 23 years. Both of my previous runs for office were some of the same residents. Just so happens that redistricting has kind of put me back into an opportunity to run again. So I welcome that opportunity this time and to talk to voters. My wife Debbie is not able to be here tonight. We live over in the Cave Spring area. I have 2 children. I'm a late blooming dad. I've got a 6-year-old in the first grade at Cave Spring Elementary, and I've got an almost 3-year-old going on 30-year-old little boy. It's kind of running us all a bit crazy. Actually, we're excited to have Jody Poff as our principal at Cave Spring, who's nearby as far as principal here. So we're excited about her opportunity and what she's able to do. Been able to get excited about her first grade. One of the key issues that we're all uppermost in everybody's mind is jobs. And to some it can be a cliche. To some to say, well, who isn't talking about it? It's on all of our minds. We've been in a quagmire for the last 3 or 4 years in this country and in the state. And in my opinion, it's an all hands on deck. Everybody should figure out what they're going to do and how they're going to do it and move forward and put in ideas. If there's 140 legislators in Richmond, there should be 140 ideas about how do we move our economy forward? How do we deal with the crisis we have at hand today as far as creating jobs? And in Virginia, I think the crisis that is yet to come, which is a downsizing federal government, jobs that are going to be released out of Northern Virginia and Tidewater, jobs that are people that are making a pretty good income, and some of that income is going into taxes, and some of that's going into fees that flows into the entire state. Those are issues that we need a plan to address. I put a 4-point plan forward. If you want details, you can go to my website, Bell4Senate, the number 4Senate.com. But that 4 points centers around actually doing something. And this is legislation that I would put forward on the first day. The first one gets to entrepreneurs. I'm an entrepreneur. I've started 3 businesses. I'm on my 3rd. The first one didn't work out too well. The second one worked out pretty well, and I was able to sell it. And my current business is a wealth management practice. I've been doing that 16 years. But I don't think we give enough credence to an entrepreneur that's willing to take a chance. So my first point would be to allow someone that's willing to start a business not to pay taxes at a state or local level for the first 3 years. You might say, well, how are we going to deal with the lost revenue? What are we losing? We're encouraging someone that might have gotten laid off and might be willing to say, I'm going to take some money that I've got put away and save, and I'm going to start that business. I'm going to take a risk. And to take those obstacles out of that. My wife tried to do that actually at her home. She wanted to start a cake baking business. She did a few cakes and did all the paperwork, as Ms. Horn would know, and sat down and spent some time with her to figure out all the paperwork, and that wasn't her forte. But then she came back after a night sat on a accounting team and realized she's had to send in the sales tax form in addition to the egg form and a variety of other forms that were necessary to have a cake baking business out of your home. And even though she didn't sell anything that month, she still got fined for not sending in the paperwork on a certain day. She said, I don't need this. I've got a 2-year-old at the time to chase around the house. I don't need this. So let's put that aside. Let's give them that opportunity. let's look for opportunities for, and I'll put forward legislation action in this area to reduce the corporate tax rate on businesses that will locate in a rural community. Give them the opportunity to bring jobs in our part of the state. I want to integrate our higher education system. I've been on the Board of Visitors for a few years. We need to have that integrated into our economic development system. I'm not able to go through, I must have been on my 15-minute speech, so I'm already kind of getting cut off. But I'll be glad to answer some questions for you. But jobs is a key part of where I'm going down there. Unfortunately, my opponent hasn't put in any jobs legislation in 4 years. The first day, I would have done more than he would have done in the last 4. I welcome your questions. Thank you for allowing me to be here, and actually looking forward to serving you for a third time and a third term. So, thank you.
Brenda, I think there was a question.
Mr. Bell, the audience here had 3 questions for you. I'll ask them separately if you would just respond to them. The first question was, what is your position on the state forcing counties to assume responsibility for items like secondary road maintenance and retirement for, or the state portion of retirement compensation for county employees?
Well, they're somewhat separate because they're moving, but they're of the same general vein that I would not be supportive of sending obligations to a locality without giving them the opportunity, without the revenue. Where's the revenue going to come from? Is it going to be state is currently collecting and that revenue is now also providing? What I would not support on the roads, I think they call it devolution is kind of the code word I believe might be floating around on that it's not going to be a dumping. It's not going to say, you've got to take care of the roads, and you figure out how much you need to, at the locality, raise the real estate tax to deal with that. We're not doing that. Not under my, if I'm able to be your senator, I'm not going to support something like that. It's a cop-out, and too long that's been the kick the can down the road. The federal government basically tells the state government what to do and doesn't provide necessarily resources to do that, or they run trillions of dollars of debt, and then the state is doing it to the localities when they have to balance their budget. Let's kick it down to the localities and make them figure out, and those running for the Board of Supervisors, where they're going to get the revenue, because they don't have anywhere to kick it to. They can't kick it to the Civic group leads out here to have them. So I'm not going to support that. I think it's something we need to flesh out. The same thing comes back to anything that is a funding of localities. We've got to stop that. Let's just throw it in their lap and make them figure it out and raise the revenue. We've got to look at a balanced approach.
Thank you. The second question, sir, was, as an elected official, do you believe it would be appropriate for taxpayer monies to guarantee municipal bonds for a private sector project, specifically the Slate Hill development on 220 and 419?
That obviously it's kind of a cross between what localities in Roanoke County would have done in preceding that. And I have to be honest with you, as a framework, I think that was done appropriately they have a way with all to be able to do that from a state legislative standpoint. Personally, I didn't support it. I don't think it was the right approach. If a private company cannot raise the money, it's always something who is ultimately responsible. As you dance around this lower cost on the interest and a better way to do it, and we just package this and you can only charge a couple percent and it's a better way, eventually who is eventually responsible? It's the taxpayer. And it's the wrong approach. If a private business wants to develop something like that, do that. But because they're running into difficulties about acquiring the necessary funds to develop the project themselves, and say, well, let me bring the taxpayer on top and get the taxpayer to back it up, I don't support that. I know there's some others that might be in office or running for office that might have had some stickiness on that issue. But I think once you go down that road, eventually, regardless of how it sounds great and the business person may put a great package together, eventually you're basically putting the taxpayer on the hook. And I think that's a wrong way to go.
Sir, the third question was in regards, and it's a hypothetical, in regards to the road project on 221, if the decision were left solely up to you, would you have approved spending for the straightening of that road?
I think the easy answer to that is yes. It's something that's been on the 6-year plan for years, going back into my first term. It's going back a long way, and having gone down there and asking questions and receiving, make sure this stays on the 6-year plan, but it comes on the 7th year of a 6-year plan. That's been pushed down the road for a long way. So I think that it's something that's been important to those of us that spend a lot of time. I live not too far off 221 over in the Finn Forest area, to move forward. And fortunately, there are some activities, some actions being to move that off the dime. So, thank you.
Brandon, probably